One that struck me was the mortality rate of infants.
It's not the mortality rate, it's really the number of babies per thousand who die, which is not really the rate as we would sort of.
Well, I took it as infants, a lot of infants die.
Yeah,
and still,
this is the number, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And still there is a very high growth rate in the population of India. You mentioned there as an opportunity for the health industry. So, but I also heard that China is like a role model for India. So, China at one point in the history took the decision for controlled birth rate. So, would that be something that India would be considering? Because if there would be an improvement in the health industry and the infants would not die, we would create like a very large Indian population that would be very hard to feed and to grow the economy as well.
I think you're right. I think there is a debate as to whether we can just rely on the natural dynamics of the population, of the population growth process to help economic growth and these issues, and whether we should again proactively intervene in bringing in sort of reducing the rate of growth of population. So some kind of curve on the number of children, etc. Two issues. One is that if you look at China, this is the age dependency ratio. So the number of dependents as a percentage of the working age population. And what is happening with China is that as the dependence ratio declines, right, the economy gets a boost because you have more of the working age population related compared to the people who depend on it. What is happening in China, and China sort of hit a sweet spot, has got the benefits of that, and because of the one-child policy, right, it's now by 2020, it's sort of going fairly high in the dependency ratio. So China would have a lot of problems in supporting its relatively old population compared to its working age population. In India, there are two issues. One, we are scared of this. We believe that we're just about to enter the demographic sweet spot. If you look at the red line, right, our dependency ratio has started moving really down, right, from 2010 onwards. So a lot of policy advisors suggest that, hang on, let's not mess around with the population control because we've just hit the sweet spot. For a number of other economies, this sweet spot has been associated with very high growth, including China. There are other critics who say that, hang on, we need to interfere. We've had a very bad experience with family planning and control. Right? There's extreme coercion, etc. So in political circles, it's a bit of a sort of a dirty word, population control. And that's one of the reasons why we really haven't thought of this option very carefully. Now, I suspect that going forward, we'll have to give this some thought. It's an open debate. As of now, we are depending on the sheer power of the demographic dividend to take us through. And we're just about to hit the sweet spot.
Just to follow up on that question, in terms of demographics and the younger population, one of the key differences between China and India is that we don't have a caste system, right? So in India, in terms of where the demographics and where that population is growing, do you have information about where that population is growing? I'm going to try and tie it into some assumptions, right? In terms of China as an observation, what I've seen certainly over the last 14, 20 years that I've lived there is that people are educated overseas and they return to the country to try and make a living. There's less of a brain drain in terms of what's happening in China. So what I'm proposing to you, and for the purpose of the discussion, is that true for India? Do people feel that the society's working for them, that it's giving an opportunity for locals to make something of the economy. Because when you talk about infrastructure, really, what is holding that back? How important is the actual structure of government and society in enabling India to really capture that potential? Because we are talking about potential, it seems. And what is surprising to me is that we're not growing quicker, we're not developing quicker as a country. And I'm careful not to try and use growth as a byword for consumption as well. I'm more interested in development of the country. Could you pick up on some of those things?
Yeah, and let me just sort of respond to some of that. Yes, I think the brain drain, which has been a very major problem earlier, has dissipated considerably. There are a lot of people coming back, particularly in what the new economy industries like IT, telecom, etc. In terms of the entrepreneurial staff, I mean, we have a very, very well-established entrepreneurial staff. Unlike, I think, in China, we have very strong, in terms of high-end education institutions, we have some of the best, and we're trying to sort of buffer that up by adding to resources. One of the issues, and this goes back to a deeper philosophical debate as between controlled societies and societies that are not controlled. One of the issues that I should have, it would have been fair on my part to mention this in the context of the relatively slow development of infrastructure. Two things are holding up infrastructure in many cases. One is the acquisition of land and the compensation for the acquisition of land to small farmers, marginal farmers, etc., for large-scale projects. Right? China has not had that problem because it's just, run roughshod over. I'm just being very honest. China, I have enormous regard for China, and I do believe that the China model is one that China's regard for environmental issues also is respect. Ranging from Three Gorges or whatever, we could, talk about a whole number of issues. In our case, we had environmental problems for a number of projects, ranging from roads to nuclear power plants, to iron ore projects, POSCO, the big Korean guy, environment. So I think one of the reasons why we get dragged down vis-a-vis China, while we've done 9%, vis-a-vis 10%, is that we have not functioned in a controlled society, right? And consequently, we haven't been able to just, relocate large masses of people overnight to set up a project there. And perhaps being too hard for China, and this is perhaps a bit of a caricature, but that's the way it feels. And as I said, I mean, this is the price that we pay for having a sort of pluralistic democracy. Underpinning this fact, I think, is the degree of ethnic homogeneity in China. I mean, if you have more than 90% of the population who are un-Chinese, then you would tend to get far more consensus in decisions than in India, where we have so many linguistic, ethnic groups. So India is a different animal altogether. But as I said, this leads to a deeper philosophical issue. A lot of, if you talk to investors, a lot of people say that we prefer India because you need a system with an established judiciary, regulations, recourse to law, there is a problem, and that happens in India, although the process could be very tedious, but that ultimately happens. A multinational company can win a case against the government in India, and that would not happen in China. So the philosophical question is, will controlled societies ultimately deliver better results, or is democracy the only game in town in long term? I think that's the question that we need to answer. A lot of what China has achieved, I think, again, this could be a bit of a is very much a function of its control of the labor market. So I mean, that's the way I see it. Although I have enormous, I think Chinese, the sense of enterprise, the sense of aspiration, etc., it's fantastic. But China certainly a better place to live than Chinese. And I like Chinese food. So.
Hi. We have a question. Coming back to your point about the population and how the population evolves. According to the projections that you show, certainly you have secured the HR in terms of the development and growth that you expected. There's a question of skills. And I used to be an expat living here in Bangalore. And one of the things that I observed is, especially on the skills of the people, you know, Indian people is pretty much driven by the position on a company they are holding. And that's what I heard when I got my trainings and what I experienced when I was here. And what this is causing, and the investment also in the IT services mainly, is that people keep changing jobs like within 2-3 years, going over on the management ladder. But at the end, when they reach mid-30s, you can see that the experience is not yet focused on maybe one company or one industry. Maybe it's a question of balancing the industry segment that you have, because right now I think 70% is being driven by services, and in services IT plays a high role. Is there anything that the government or policy is being driven to balance somehow, or have a national plan on where you're going to develop your skills?
Thank you. I'm glad to get a perspective from an expat who actually works in services. Even from I have to work in a bank, and we've had similar problems in financial services. And as I said earlier, education is a big issue, not just in terms of growth of life, but in terms of the quality of education and the ability to match the needs of the industry with the kind of skills that education provides. Unfortunately, the response, I mean, again, there's been a response. I think there is sort of a realization that this has to be done. The government has done a couple of very major things, including setting up a National Skills Development Corporation, which would work with different industries in setting up a center for industry-specific training. One of the encouraging things that I've been seeing in different segments, especially segments that are doing well, I can give you an example of auto components doing very well in supplying Europe supplying as well. But there is a response coming from industry. Industry who are picking up either the high school graduates and putting them through their own training program and making sure that what they're teaching actually sort of dovetails with what their needs are. So this is an interesting response from industry which has been, constrained or compromised by the lack of quality education. There is a response coming from the private sector in terms of academic companies like Educom and so on, who are trying to provide specific skills rather than going in for. If you look at the history of India, we sort of followed the British liberal model where being a graduate, whether it's liberal arts or whatever was seen to be enough. There are lots of engineering colleges, etc., but quality is an issue. So I think those are being addressed, both from the private sector and from the state. Whether the intensity of the response is adequate is an open question. I suspect that, as with most things in India, it is unlikely to be adequate, but hopefully it will pick up. But it's a question of matching demand and supply, and if you have a robust private sector, somehow ensure through the work of the market that this sort of comes forth. And I see some examples of that already there. I should assume I've run out of time.